Hi everyone, this is Mohsina and welcome again. Thank you for subscribing to my channel, and for those who have missed my previous video, you can find the link in the comment section so you will know the basics of QA and the IT process. In today's session, I'll talk about SDLC, which is Software Development Life Cycle. I'll try to give as simple as example I can to help you explain and without using terminology so you know what is what. So anything we do, we always plan. That's how everything starts. We plan like how to do this stuff. Now let me give an example of throwing a party. When you plan for a party, you basically plan like what has to be done, how many people has to be invited, like what would be your theme for the party. So this is how even the software development lifecycle starts. The software development lifecycle, like we have process for everything. Similarly, all the IT companies follows a process, a life cycle, which has different phases. Now, whatever you see here, the planning, defining, and the circle, it's nothing but each phases. They are the like own phases. And there are different types of method or models which are used as part of software development lifecycle, out of which I'm going to talk only about waterfall and agile. Hybrid model is a combination of waterfall model and agile model. So to begin with, what is software development lifecycle? Like I said, everything starts with a planning phase. So you plan what needs to be done. As I discussed about like IT product owner giving us the requirements, that is what is planning. Like they are trying to figure out what they want so the rest of the team can work on it. So once we are done with planning, which is in this case like requirement gathering or requirement elaboration, we are trying to figure out what the requirement should be. Second phase is defining where it will get documented. Now, when you plan for a party, you start writing it down, who all the guests you will be inviting. Basically, you document it so you know like what needs to be done and what are the next steps, like what theme it should be, how many stuff you have to get for the party. So similarly, this documentation is done by BSA team, which is called defining phase. So once the requirements are defined and finalized, then we get into designing and building. This two phase goes hand in hand as this is taken care by development team most of the time. Now in the designing phase, the development will figure out how it can be designed. Like as simple as that, they can choose the language, or they know that if they know the language, they will try to figure out a solution like how do we build in such a way that we meet the client requirements. Once they figure out how the design has to be, they start building. Building is nothing but coding in this case. It can be coding or it can be like whatever the requirement says, they are trying to give that product out. And once this phase is complete, we get into testing phase. Testing phase is where we will start testing the product to see if it meets the requirement. It can be a product or an application like a website application, and we start testing, and when everything looks good, we go ahead with the deployment. The same cycle continues like over and over again and again until the product is complete, and when we start something new product, the same thing happens. So this is SDLC, which all the companies follow. And like I said, there are different models where things pretty much work differently, but the phases will remain the same. The phases is going to be the same, the process, but the models are different. So we will talk about waterfall model first and see how it works. Though waterfall model was used extensively before, but now everyone is leaning towards agile for a reason. So waterfall model, I'll start highlighting. So waterfall model, the way it worked was the first phase is planning phase. where we gather the requirement and we define the requirement. So what we do is we wait for this phase to be 100% complete. So we make sure that we, as in the client or whoever writes a requirement, they will put all the requirements together. And once this is 100% complete, that is when we move on to the next phase of designing and implementation. And again, the same concept carries. We enter to the next phase only when the prior phase is 100% complete. So in this case, this stage has to be 100% complete before we move on to implementation. The whole point of waterfall model is not like multitasking, but things are taken in a sequential step-by-step order. So this is the process which follows. If you notice, it all follows the SDLC process, but the way they are following it is different. Meaning they will do step-by-step phases. So once this is done, it goes to implementation. And once this is 100%, then the testing begins. And once the testing is done, it will be deployed to end users. And once that is done, the maintenance phase starts, which is nothing but in case if any issues comes up, like customer calls up and gives us some issues that, hey, this is not working. Say, for example, you are trying to add your profile into an application, say target.com or something. And if that doesn't work, you give a call to customer service. So that becomes an issue. And as part of that issue, the team will try to resolve that issue for you. So that phase is maintenance. So the main point to remember in waterfall model is everything has to be done 100% before we move on to the next phase. Now let's see how different is Agile and what is the advantages of Agile over Waterfall. This is the Agile model. And if you see in each phase, the requirements, defining, designing, development, testing, QA and UAT is nothing but testing. These two phases are like testing phases, and then release. Everything is same. Now what is different is the requirement is broken down into small chunks. In the waterfall model, if I try to give the same example of login, add to cart, and payment, then in the waterfall model, all three, how login should work, how add to cart should work, and how payment should work, everything will be defined like during the requirement analysis phase. However, in the Agile, they break it into small chunks, which is called like sprint. In a given sprint, we will work on this module. Okay. Now, what is sprint is? Sprint is nothing but the duration. Like maybe a sprint can be of 3 weeks, sprint can be of 4 weeks, sprint can be of like 2 months or 3 months. Sprint is nothing but the duration which every team has, like, you know, their own defined time. So in the sprint 1, they will work on login. The process of SDLC remains the same. The requirements will be defined, and the UI design takes place, and then the development happens, then it goes to testing, and then it is released. So what is different here is once the development team is done with this login, they will move on and start working, or at least figure out how to like design add to cart. So they don't have to wait for the entire sprint to complete 100%. Basically, this is called multitasking. While we are testing, the development team will start looking at sprint 2. Similarly, once the requirements are given to us in sprint 1, the client and the BSA team will already start working on figuring out what should happen in add to cart. So in this case, the main advantage is the teams are not waiting for like the first phase to complete, because they have back-to-back work which keeps them occupied and busy. And the other advantage is now every sprint, it can be made available to the end user quickly. In the waterfall, now say the requirement takes like 2-3 weeks, and then the development takes another 4 weeks, and the testing takes another 2 weeks or 3 weeks. So when all this has to be completed 100% one by one, then it's going to take months to make sure that the product gets delivered. However, in Agile, by breaking down into chunks, a product can be made available in a small chunks to the user, and it doesn't take months. So that is the main advantage of Agile over Waterfall. Now we'll talk about more like in the next coming videos about what is Agile and how Agile works, what are the meetings involved in the Agile. So the major differences, I have listed few major differences of Agile versus Waterfall, which will be in the next slide. So whatever I have said, I've just documented and made it in a like differentiating Agile and Waterfall. When it comes to scope, the scope is nothing but the requirements. The scope is divided into multiple sprints. Like, we know what needs to be done in that particular sprint. That is scope. However, in Waterfall, the requirements is well defined and finalized. Well ahead, they will make sure that it is 100% done. Less documentation and approval process. Now imagine you have to go through like a requirement of 32 pages and versus a requirement of like 5 pages at a time. So which makes it easy is like going through the 5 pages at a time versus 32 pages of document which you will be reading like maybe 3 days or 4 days or 5 days. So that kind of approval process and documentation is less in Agile, and in Waterfall it really takes more time. Flexibility wise, if the requirement, there's something which the client must add in the requirement, it is pretty easy to modify during this sprint period. However, in the Waterfall, the requirements are logged and it cannot be modified easily. Multiple deployment to production in a short frame. Like in a shorter frame, you can give that product available to the end user. However, in Waterfall, it has to like wait for months and months. And phases are in parallel and can move forward. This is basically about multitasking. You can multitask and you don't have to wait on other team. And in Waterfall, one phase cannot begin until the previous phase is completed. This is the major difference between Waterfall and Agile. And as far as like the client involvement goes, in Agile, the client will be like actively involved. They know like what needs to be done. They will always be in touch with the BSc team or sometimes with the Dev and QA team. So they will have active participation. However, in Waterfall, it's not like much active like how it is in Agile. So basically, Waterfall model is good if your requirements are very small and for a smaller project, and Agile is good when there is a continuous development has to be done for the product. And hybrid is nothing but the combination of Waterfall and Agile. There could be a situation where the requirement might be like well defined and finalized, so that puts that into Waterfall model. However, the next things like testing and the development, if they break it down, if they break the requirements into like small chunks and put it into sprint, that becomes a Agile model. So that is hybrid model. And one good thing about Agile can be customized, meaning depending on project to project, they can customize the Agile. They can fix the sprint duration like 3 weeks or 4 weeks. So we will talk more about this terminologies like sprint and what are the meetings, like I said, involved in Agile, everything in my next video. I'm gonna make more videos about more into Agile, talking about Agile. Okay, so that was it for today's video. And like I said, stay tuned for my next videos where we will discuss the terminologies of testing, like software testing. What are the terminologies which are frequently used, and how do you interact with other teams when you start working? And this video will definitely be helpful for freshers who are either brand new to IT or who are trying to get into IT as a QA person. If you like this video, subscribe so you will get a notification when I upload my next video. Thanks again for watching this video, and I'll see you soon. Bye.